Hi again, Andy here at Maltech. Today we're going to go over our suspension setup sheet and we're going to fill this out completely. Show you a better picture of this, and you can go right on our website www.maltechatv.com to fill this sheet out. And we're going to go completely over step by step of this sheet to show you how to fill it out. And after you fill out these simple measurements, this is all we need to set your suspension up correct for you. So go online, print this sheet out. It's in PDF format. We're going to try to get a JPEG format on there too, for some people that don't have an Adobe reader on their computer. The next thing you need to do is find somebody that can read one of these, a tape measure. We don't have to get down nitty gritty, but I'd really like to have it to a 1/8 of an inch at least. If you want to do a 1/16 of an inch, that's fine. But we've had several people that send our shocks in, send us measurements, fill these sheets out, and when they get them back, they aren't right. We start going over stuff, and ends up they had some kid or they had their wife measuring. And if they're going to do that, have them put their thumb, right next to where that measurement was. But I'd really like to have someone that could read a good tape measure to fill this sheet out. It'd sure help a lot of headaches for later on down the road, and you're going to get your stuff done right the first time. So we're going to go over this step by step. We're going to fill out this form for this TT bike. Doesn't matter what kind of bike it is. I'm going to show you where you fill in, for what lengths, and just exactly how you go for this. Now I will say, this side of the form is for you guys, and this side of the form is for us, anything in red. So you don't have to fill all this stuff in the red out. Also, one of the very first things you need to do is put air in your tires. Air them up to the proper pressure or to what you run, because that's what you want your shock set up. That's where you're going to be racing or riding with your air in your tires at that pressure. So please air up all your tires, check it with a really good gauge, and then you know that we're all on the same page and everything's going to work together. Also, you need to do this, everything step by step in this video as we do it. Don't skip any steps. You need to do it as we do it in this video, because if you skip a step, you're going to have to backtrack and you're going to have to bolt your shocks back up. It's going to save you a lot of time. Just watch this video, go through it. I'm going to have at the very end, we're going to have a step-by-step, a quick reference guide. You can fast forward to that, but it's just going to make your life a lot easier. I also want to note that if you are sending your shocks in for service only, oil change, you just need new seals, you can just stop watching this video, and we don't need that. But please, if you are having that done, please send us a note in the box that says, need oil change, replace the seals in oil, with your address and name. Definitely, I have a set of shocks here right now. We have no idea whose they are. So like I say, you stop watching this video if you're just going to send this in and have your shock service at this time. Alright, first thing we want to do is set our rear, or check our race sag on the back of the bike. But first, before we do that, we have to make sure that the preload is correct on the rear shock spring. I like these Craftsman jacks. They're very accurate. They're pretty expensive, but they are well worth the money. So to check rear race, or race sag, we're going to have to put the correct amount of preload on the rear spring, and that correct amount is 3 turns of preload on the spring. So we're going to raise the bike completely off the ground, so the tires are off the ground, and we're going to set race sag. I'm going to go over the bench with a shock that I've already got off the bike, and I'm going to show you what 3 turns of preload looks like and how to set it. Alright, this is much easier to show you with the shock off the bike than it is with it on. You do not have to remove the shock to do this. It's just easier to demonstrate in this video what's going on. This nut is what sets the preload on your spring. Sometimes there's a jam nut. We've removed the jam nut on this shock just because it's not needed on the bike setup that we do, because you have spring pressure on it and this isn't going to come loose. We're going to flip it upside down because it's easier. But when this is on the bike, first you undo the jam nut by turning it, generally looking from the top. You're going to turn it counterclockwise, and that's going to loosen it. And also with this, we're going to run the preload all the way off the spring. Actually, I'm going to do it like it's in the bike so it's easier for you to visualize. So we're going to turn this nut until there's no preload on this spring. And to know that, we're going to jiggle the spring up and down. And with the tires off the ground, and you can see this spring moves up and down. It's also going to move freely. So what we're going to do is just turn this nut only until we just touch the spring. And we'll know that because the spring tries to start turning on us. Right there. So now we're going to put 3 more turns of preload in the spring. There's a half a turn, 1 turn. And this doesn't have to be exact, but we'd like it to be pretty close. And you can grab the spring, and that will also turn the jam nut most of the time. So there's 2 turns and 3 turns of preload. So we're pushing down this spring 3 turns. Like I said, just act like this shock is on the bike. You can do everything on the bike. Now we're going to go back to the bike, and we're going to show you how to measure sag properly on the back of the bike. Now with 3 turns of preload in this spring on the bike, we now have the bike completely off the ground. We're going to measure from the top of the axle straight up to any point on the subframe, and it has to be directly above the axle. So we're going to set the tape measure on this subframe, or on the axle, and we're going to measure up directly above it to a point on the subframe. And I'm going to go right to the bottom of this bar in here, and we're measuring 14.5 inches currently, within a 1/16 of an inch measurement. So we're going to go back to the sheet and we're going to fill that out. For starters, you can fill out your name and address, your weight, your bike year and model, make and model, phone number, email, and your credit card info. We can call you after the shocks are done, or you can go ahead and fill it out. It doesn't matter to us. That's kept confidential, so you don't have to worry about anyone taking your number. Now, we're going to fill this out as a TT bike. So we're going to go ahead and circle this so we know it's for a TT bike. We're going to put the A-arm brand. These are Hausers. We're going to put the width plus 2 inch. And we're going to go down below and we're going to circle one, as it says, for extended. And we already know that's 8.5 inches for flat track and 1 inches for our compressed height. Also down below on the rear, we can do the same. Okay, for the rear, we have already figured out our wheels off the ground sag measurement, and that was 14.5 inches from the top of the axle straight above it to the subframe. Okay, we're going to drop the bike on the ground, pull the jack out. Preston's going to get on the bike, and I'm going to measure rear sag to our compressed height from the top of the axle straight up to that same point on the subframe. So go ahead and get on, Preston. He's going to jump up and down a few times while holding the front brake. And then I'm going to measure again from the top of the axle to that exact same point on the subframe, which is 11¼ inches. Alright, so we're going to fill this out 11.5 inches. So 14.5 minus 11.5 is 3.0 inches. We're going to fill that out here. Now we're going to measure the main spring height for the front shock. Alright, Preston is going to get back on the bike. Hold the front brake, jump up and down a few times to settle the suspension in. Now we're going to measure the main spring height, so the height of just the bottom spring, not any of the tender springs. Doesn't matter how much preload's on this spring. So we're going to go from the very bottom of the spring all the way to the top of the spring, and this measures 7¼ inches. So we're going to go to our sheet and fill that out. Okay, here's where we put our main spring height. 7.25 inches. Now if you know your tender spring rate or your main spring rate that's currently on the bike, you can fill that out here. I know that mine is a 250 and a 175. And then same on the rear. We don't have a tender spring on the rear, we're running a single rate. We're going to put 225, put a dash in there because we don't have a, it's a single rate. If you're building a new set of shocks, if we're building a new set for you, we'll need to know what this is if you're not going to send it. If you need us to calculate that out, on our website you can measure the spring and there's a calculator on there to figure this out. Or you can just mail us the spring, or you can mail us the shock itself. Now we need to know how much it started at though too. If you're going to send us just the rate, we need to know if it started at an 8-inch spring with it off the bike, or if it started at a 7 7/8 inch spring or a 6-inch. We need to know how much it deflected is what we're trying to calculate here. Okay, now we're going to take a ride height measurement. Rider's still standing on the bike. He's jumped up and down a few times already, so our bike's settled in. We're going to go right under the motor mounts. You'll have to get your head down low to see what this ride height is to get an accurate measurement. We're 5 inches on the back, and then we're going to go right by the foot pegs. And we are 4 3/4 on the back for ride height. So for our front ride height was 5 inches. I'll write that there. Ride height on the rear is 4.75 inches. You can also put the brand for the linkage. We're running the Maltec version 1.9 on this bike. Swing arm, a Hauser. And I don't like to put negative so many inches because of different years of bikes, and people run, you know, an odd year of swing arm on there. So I want the center of the pivot bolt to the center of the axle, and I know off of this bike it's 16.75 inches. Okay, now we're going to record our shock's extended height, and you can see we circled 8.5 inches, so we're going to do this measurement at 8.5. I have special stands made up that are set at 8.5 inches right now. And we can verify this by measuring that these are 8.5 inches. We've removed all 3 shocks off the bike. So now I'm going to bring you in and we're going to show you how to measure our shock's extended length, eye to eye, what we call it. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, we need to make sure this frame is level, and this frame is pushing down right now, so I need to make sure it's held down and so the actual frame is level before we take this measurement. So Preston, you want to push down. He's going to hold down on the frame to make sure it's not tilting, and we're going to measure what we call our eye to eye length. And we're going to measure from the center of the top shock bolt to the center of the lower shock bolt. And we are coming up with 16 inches even. Now we're going to record that on the sheet. Alright, now we're going to record this. 16.00 inches was our extended height at 8.5 inches off the ground. Now we're going to go to the back. Now we're going to record the rear extended length. The frame is still at 8.5 inches off the ground. Remember, this is depending on what setup. If it's motocross or cross country, it's going to be 12 inches. So I'm going to get in here and go from the top eyelet to the bottom, and we are 14.625, 14 5/8 inches. We're going to record that now on the setup sheet. Okay, so now we're at the back. We measured at 8.5 inch extended height, the rear shock, and we measured 14 5/8 or 14.625 inches. Now we're going to go to the 1 inch height, our frame height. Now as you can see, this bike is completely dropped down on the ground, and we are using our 1 inch height because this is a TT bike. So I have 1 inch aluminum bars. You may have to come up with something on your own to space it up to the exact height. When we do a motocross or cross country bike, we need that height at 1.5 inches. So a 2x4 measures exactly 1.5 inches. I always recommend using 2 of them, making sure that the frame is level. You shouldn't be able to rock the frame. That makes sure it's down. And we verified we're 1 inch, so we're going to move to the front now. We're going to measure our compressed shock height, and then we're going to do the rear compressed shock height. Alright, I forgot to mention something to look at while you're measuring your bike with it fully compressed. We want to have clearance between everything. So you should be able to grab the A-arm or the wheel and raise up on it. And there shouldn't be any binding issue. And also with the rear end, you should be able to move the rear tires up off the ground without it raising the subframe at the same time. If you cannot, that means you're bottoming on something, or if you can't get all the way down on your 1 inch blocks on a TT bike or 1.5 inch on motocross or cross country. So what we need is you to raise that bike up with the frame level until you have at least 1/4 inch gap on whatever it's hitting on, be it the brake caliper hitting the exhaust, brake caliper hitting the airbox. It's usually you're going to be your brake caliper in the rear end, or your brake caliper hitting the subframe. In the front end, you're going to have a binding issue. Also, something we want to look at is the toe change and the clearance on the tie rods hitting on the frame or the A-arms. And if that happens, it's more your geometry of your chassis than it is. It's not a shock problem or anything, but now is a good time to look at that. And you don't want the tires to scrub in a lot. If it does, that's called bump steer, and you need to repair that and fix that. The Hondas, we have an easy fix for that to make it better. Alright, so we've got the frame at 1 inch off the ground. Frame is level. We're going to measure our shocks compressed length. And we are measuring 12.5 inches. So we're going to record that now on the sheet. Okay, we've taken our measurement at 1 inch. And we're at 12.5 inches, 12.500. Now we're going to measure our rear. This is pretty difficult usually to get in here. Frame's still 1 inch off the ground. I'm going to come in from the back side. And get centered up. And this linkage is measuring 10.75. So 10.75 inches. We're going to go record that now on our data sheet. Okay, we just recorded or measured our rear, and it was 10.75 inches. We're completely done on the rear. The only thing else I need from you is any notes. You may put building new shocks or modifying to work with this linkage. Just write any specifics that's going to help us out. Leave your phone number, make sure that we've got it on there. We can give you a call, email address too, and that'll help out. I appreciate it. Shoot me a message on Facebook. You can go email us at Andy@MallTechATV. We're going to go over a review real quick, and this video will be finished. Okay, in summary, like I said before, we do not need this shock setup sheet filled out if you're just sending them in for service. You just throw a note in that says we need service or seals changed, oil changed, whatever you need done on that shock, so don't fill it out. Everything needs to be in the exact order that we did this video in. You need the proper air in the tires first of all. Set the rear spring preload correctly. Measure the ride height. Measure the main front springs, only the main springs, not the tender springs too. Measure the rear race sag. Then put the bike on stands. Measure the extended shock lengths, and then measure the